With me today is Graeme Cowan, and Graeme helps busy leaders and teams become more caring and resilient. He is a founding member. Sorry, I'll start that again. Graeme Cowan is with me today, and Graeme helps busy leaders and teams become more caring and resilient. He is a founding board director of Are You OK and hosts the Caring CEO podcast, which is rated top two globally in best 50 workplace mental health podcasts. He held senior positions at Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer and Kearney. After a severe 5-year depression, he developed new insights into personal and team resilience and performance. Graeme has authored 4 books, including the acclaimed Back from the Brink, endorsed by the former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair. And he also co-founded We Care 365, which creates e-learning for managers to help them have better mental health conversations. So welcome, Graeme.
Thanks, Julie. Lovely to be with you.
So good to have you with me, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. Now, if I can start, you've spoken really openly about experiencing clinical depression at a time when that wasn't commonly spoken about, especially in leadership circles. And you've spoken about that through your book, Back to the Brink. Can you take us back to that period and what was actually happening beneath the surface?
Yeah, I actually had my first episode of depression when I was 21, but at that time, it really wasn't spoken about. And I didn't know what it was, and no one really talked about that. So altogether, I probably had 5 major episodes, but the last one was by far the worst. At that point, I was a vice president with Kearney, the global management consulting company. And we were especially focusing on executive search. At that time, it was really very positive. It was a dot-com boom, the previous dot-com boom. But then there was a tech crash and suddenly our business finished up overnight. And in a very, very short period of time, I lost my job, my marriage broke down, and I had to go and live with my parents because I couldn't look after myself. And it is very interesting reflecting on that now because looking back, it doesn't seem very rational, some of the things and some of the decisions I made. But at the time, it was just very, very real. And I think that's something I talk about the red zone and being in the red zone for a period of time. And you are actually insane if you're too long in that area. You don't think rationally and you really catastrophize. You say, it's never going to finish. So it led to a very, very hopeless sort of situation from my perspective.
Yeah, when you don't have that hope, that can really take you down a deep, dark hole. So I'm so sorry that you experienced that and, at that time. What made you want to share your experience publicly with people?
Yeah, I remember being very, very down. I just came out of hospital and I was staying at my parents' place in Foster. And I remember being in the kitchen with my mum, lovely view outside, but I'm just saying, why me, why me, why me?
Yeah.
And she hit me dead in the eyes with one of those mother stares and said, I believe you'll use this experience to help other people. And at the time, I thought that was really would never happen. But it did sow a seed, and my recovery was very gradual. It wasn't sort of a straight line, it was sort of up and down, up and down. But it basically formed around exercise, started to walk regularly, and then reconnecting with family and friends that I'd become isolated from through my choice. And I found that it did help catching up with those people. It felt good. And I then embraced meditation, and that's been a really regular part of my life since. And it's one of my one thing, basically, to stay on track.
Yeah.
But then I had this idea, and I guess it formed a little bit from Mum's advice
Mm.
to write this first book, Back from the Brink. And it was sharing stories of some well-known and everyday people who'd been through depression or
Mm.
bipolar. And it was a critical element of my recovery because when you're really in the red zone and very depressed, you're very, very me focused. But thinking about this book, I then went very much into we focus. What can I share? What stories can I find which will help people to navigate this very, very difficult experience? And it was a best-selling book. I think it was the first of its kind to really share stories of real people and some quite well-known people as well,
Mm.
who'd been in dark times but came out on top.
Yes, it was such a courageous thing to do. And one thing I really loved in reading Great Leaders Care at the start was something that you shared, about your recovery in terms of connecting with people, because of course
Yeah,
that can really give you, so much, as you say, happiness. Like it felt good, but you didn't feel like it. Like you didn't feel like doing it at the time, but you still did it.
yeah.
And I think that was a really interesting distinction that you shared. It was like something that you knew was going to make you feel better.
And of course, it's one of the greatest
Yeah.
takeaways from that experience that, the quality of life depends on the quality of our relationships.
Yeah.
And making time each week for people that are good for you is a very, very sound practice. It helps us to stay centered by seeing people that you feel good being around, who, are comfortable being vulnerable with each other
Mm,
and really pull together sometimes when things get tough. You can call it like our
absolutely.
scaffolding. Of people around us that can help hold us up when we get one of those setbacks that always happen.
Yes, for sure. And the power of sharing stories in your first book and your story, because you think people at high level, they handle the stress, that's it's just something that they're made to do. They must be different, cut from a different cloth. But when you hear about, really well-known people and those who have had, high levels in organizations, and you think, okay, I'm not abnormal here. Like this is not something where I'm different. It's something that other people go through as well. It normalizes, it validates people.
Very much so, and it's become a lot more common than we would
Yeah.
think. Recent Wiley research came out in December 2025 and found out that 47% of managers, almost one in two, are feeling severely stressed each week, severely stressed. Now, it didn't differentiate between like middle managers and top leadership teams, but no matter what way you look at it, almost one in two managers are finding it very difficult. And they're often, stuck in the middle. They're given instructions by, the leadership team.
Yes.
Their people are on the front with their customers, and they're trying to make it all happen without impacting their own mood. And so, yeah, I learned this the hard way that, self-care isn't selfish. Making sure we put fuel in our own tanks is our number one priority, quite frankly.
Yes. And that's why your new book, Great Leaders Care, lands at a really interesting time. Because as you said, burnout is high.
Yeah.
The rate of stress is really high. Um, AI is accelerating everything, and uncertainty is extremely high as well. So, what are you seeing in leaders that made you feel that this message was urgent now?
Well, as I mentioned, that high level of stress was really pertinent, but you don't have to look too far to see that there's some massive disruptions to workplaces happening. I
Mm,
don't know if you saw over the weekend, but Square, the payment system owned by Jack Dorsey, who previously owned Twitter, they're retrenching 4,000 people out of a 7,000 person organization.
Oh,
Now
wow. I
that's
didn't see that.
so that's a dramatic example, but you're seeing lots and lots of smaller examples where that's happening. AI has tremendous benefits, and I've found it to be fantastic for various projects and what have you that I've worked on. But if you're working in a conventional organization, and especially junior people, early stage career people, they're often seeing the number of those roles decline. So yeah, we don't know exactly where we end up, and to be honest, we don't have to know,
Yeah.
because what we need to do is to keep ourselves in a positive mood, because
Mm.
when we are in a positive mood, we're 31% more productive, 37% better at sales, and 200% better at creativity. So
Mm.
all those things are essential when we are navigating turbulent times.
Yes. Yes. And you speak about 4 pillars in your book. And without giving us the whole playbook, of course, can you briefly walk us through what they are and which ones leaders potentially most underestimate?
The 4 areas are self-care, crew care, red zone care, and code green. So self-care is about our personal energy and resilience, and making sure we do the right things each day and each week, which keep us in that right place.
Yeah.
And I talk about that you should act like a VIP. So not a wanker, but VIP stands for vitality, which is our physical health. Move well, rest well, eat well. Intimacy is our emotional connection, our emotional energy. And as we discussed before, those relationships are the biggest predictor of a good life, a productive life, a lower stress life.
Mm.
The third element is prosperity, or our career well-being. And I talk here about the importance of gratitude, which is our fuel, strengths, using our top strengths, which is our most effective tools, and purpose, which is our direction. So that's the self-care. On the crew care, this came through lots of insights from the Caring CEO podcast. And I've now interviewed, I think, 90 CEOs, nowhere near as many as you, Julia. But these are people that are achieving amazing things, like Mike Schneider, the CEO of Bunnings, and
Yep.
Steve Worrell, the former CEO of Microsoft. CEO, anyway, a whole bunch of them. But what I really found was, and how I defined a caring CEO, is someone who champions a culture of care and high performance, both those things, because I truly believe that they are interrelated. And there are 3 mindsets a really good manager and leader needs to build these amazing teams. And the first is caring about belonging. And we talked before about how powerful belonging is. And when people feel that like they belong, they're at their best. They know that if things go wrong, that you can work together to overcome that. The second part is leading with psychological safety. And you probably are aware of Amy Edmondson and her work in this area that basically shows that the most innovative and successful teams are those that really promote this team psychological safety. And what that means to us as individuals is that we can be our authentic selves. We can make suggestions or propose new ideas. We feel okay to challenge ideas we don't feel right about or have reservations about. And, that environment really allows innovation and then finally, continual improvement. And then
Mm.
the last element of a great team is growing together, realizing we're all in this together, encouraging each other to take intelligent risks. If they work out, fantastic. If they don't, we step back, we all learn from it and move forward. And then the third element is red zone care.
Yep.
And this really came out of my own personal experience and actually surveying over 4,000 people who'd gone through depression or a bipolar anxiety. So the I stands for how we identify someone. And that's around change in mood, change in appearance, change in circumstances, change in reliability, that sort of thing. C is for compassion, and that is asking, are you okay, with empathy and listening without being judgmental so the person feels heard. The A is for access expert. So that's could be your GP, it could be your EAP provider, it could be a psychologist or whatever. But getting that expert help is really tantamount. The R is for revitalizing work, and that's the science recovery that tells us that in the vast majority of cases, people are better off being connected with their teammates than sitting at home by
Mm,
themselves.
mm,
And then finally, E is about exercise. It's a universally great strategy. We have just a 30-minute brisk walk. Our mood is better for up to 12 hours later. And then the third part is Code Green. And this is where, we champion self-care and we all go for the green zone and we encourage each other to do the same thing. And with our crew performance, we go for the green zone there because, as you would know, teams have moods.
oh,
They can
yeah.
have down moods, or if they're going well, they have top moods. And
Mm,
that's when amazing work happens, when we're in that space. That's a quick
mm.
overview of those four pillars.
Yes, I love that. And I love that you've got self-care first, of course.
Mm.
Um, but with the eye care, I really love how you share those examples, because I find sometimes leaders won't ask the question because they're concerned with, oh my God, are they going to cry? Or what do I say? Or how do I help them? They don't have to be the person that offers the solutions, but can give people choice, which is really
Exactly.
empowering. Yeah,
Yeah, it does and we all always stress that, for Are You Okay and everything. You don't have to be a counselor.
exactly.
All you have to do is to show support and curiosity and help them to feel heard, sorry, because people
Yes.
feel heard, they're more likely to take advice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And as I said, I just love how you share those examples in the book, which I am loving, by the way. I'm not all the way through it, but I'm getting there. Um, so, Graham, I have to ask this question. What happens like in organizations, especially our corporates?
Yep.
Leaders aren't necessarily incentivized to care because they're still incentivized purely on results, revenue margin, productivity. That's how they're rewarded. That's how business models are built.
Yeah.
So, how do we change this? Is it down to individuals? And obviously, that starts at the top.
Yeah.
Um, can there be a groundswell at middle management? Like, how do we get this happening? Because I am 100% on, I totally agree with you in terms of this is how you create high performing teams and get results at the same time. What do
Absolutely.
we do?
Well, the first thing to know is that as leaders, we are legally responsible
Mm,
to reduce harmful stress. Now, some people refer to this as psychosocial hazards or risk,
mm,
but that's what it is. It's harmful stress. So a leader can be fined over $1 million for doing something which really was toxic in a workplace and ongoing. Um, Organizations can be fined over $2 million if they're not
mm,
doing that. So that's the stick side of things. But each of us in our team can start to create this culture of care. Of course, it makes sense if there is an overall strategy, but you don't have to wait for that,
yeah.
because a manager, and this is research from Gallup, contributes 70% towards the the well-being and the engagement in the team. 70%. So they can just have a massive, and people don't leave organizations, they leave managers. They leave managers.
100%. 100%. And I know, like, when I took over a team, was a really awful, toxic culture. And the way we turned that, it wasn't me that turned that around. I led that, but my team of leaders turned that around. And it
Yeah.
only took a short amount of time because
Yeah.
mindsets changed, conversations changed. And I think going back to your point, that positivity and the hope actually changed that we can do two things. We can be a high performing team and turn results around, but we can also be happy at the same time.
Yeah, and it, as we said before, it is contagious. And
Yeah.
the American Psychological Association did this study of managers who supported sustainable work practice and those that didn't. Now, when the manager supported a wellbeing strategy, 91% of the team were motivated. When they didn't support that, only 38% of the team felt motivated. So, self-care just flows on. And that's why, doing the right things ourselves makes a big difference. And science is behind us on this. There's a lady called Professor Sonia Lyubomirsky, and she wrote a book called The How of Happiness. And she looked at 400 peer-reviewed studies to find out what determined our mood, or what psychologists call positive affect. And what she found by going through these peer-reviewed studies was it came down to three things. Number one was our genetics. Number two were the events that happened to us and our circumstances. Number three were our intentional actions. People are often quite surprised to hear that genetics has the biggest impact, 50%. 50%. But the heartening thing is that the next one is our intentional daily actions contribute 40%. And that's something that we do choose every day, what we do and what we don't do. And, these posters are available on my website. There's the eye care poster, which we talked about previously.
Yep.
And then there is the Moodometer action plan here.
Yes.
So this shows what you do. What are the things you do if you're in the red zone to get to the amber zone? What are the things to go from the amber zone to the green zone? And what are the things to stay in the green zone? I learned all this stuff the hard way.
You had to live this. But at least now you've come up with, models and frameworks that that you share with people that they can keep top of mind. And I think, I know for myself, when, going through dark times, exercise was, and I have to exercise every single day because I know that supports my mental health.
Yeah.
And if I can't or I don't, it really impacts my mood. I know that about myself. So I think it's really understanding when and how you can move your body to really fuel that. And like you say, it's the intentional actions that you take. That is your choice.
It is. And
You've
it
got
also
to choose you.
But it also, provides a sense of control as well.
Yes.
So much is outside of control, but we can choose what we do and when we do it.
Absolutely.
And that's incredibly, I don't know, heartening and encouraging to know that we do have a large impact on our mood.
Absolutely. It's very empowering, I think. So, Graeme, after all of the CEOs you've interviewed, the organizations you've worked with, and your own lived experience, if you could give leaders just one grounded piece of advice right now to be their caring best self, what would that be?
I'll just give a quick example. Todd Harper, he's the CEO of Cancer Council Victoria. And I'm not sure, you probably may not have got to his section yet in the book. But anyway, as you know, you were there. Melbourne had the longest lockdown anywhere.
Yeah.
And Todd was beginning to feel when it first happened, really disconnected from people.
Mm.
And somehow he stumbled on the Caring CEO podcast and gave him a few ideas, but he then started the conversation with his leadership team saying, okay, what can we do to get this culture of care? What can we do to support each other? And so what they ended up coming up with was 3 things they wanted to be part of their culture going through this incredibly difficult time. And it came down to kindness, connection, and gratitude. And so each manager was encouraged to implement that in the way they thought was appropriate to their team. But there was really, really wide sharing of the gratitude, what people were grateful for, kindness that came their way in challenging circumstances, and also the connection and belonging that is really important to us. And they came out of that longest lockdown much stronger than before. They came out with 93% of employees recommending it as a place to work.
Wow.
So just the best thing to do is to start conversations, ask questions. Even asking questions like, what's the most frustrating thing about our work now? What if we did differently could make a big difference? But, going deep into those conversations, because when you do help someone be heard, you've got them. You've got them.
Absolutely. Seen, heard, and valued. That's really what people want, isn't it? So incredible. Graeme, I could speak to you forever. I will be sharing the link in the show notes so that people can grab your book, which is out on the 1st of April, and to get in contact with you and download the various things you've got on your website. So thank you so much for doing the work that you do and for being part of Leading You Today.